What's the worst way to die you can imagine? Now make it even worse. In the entire bloody history of human cruelty, one execution stands out as possibly the cruelest of all time. Picture this. A rebel leader is forced to sit naked on a red-hot iron throne, a glowing iron crown searing into his skull, and a blistering scepter clutched in his hands, all to mock him as the king of a failed rebellion. His skin sizzles against the metal, but the nightmare is just beginning. Around him stand his closest followers, deliberately starved and desperate. What happens next is beyond horror. Executioners tear chunks of flesh from the man's body with burning pliers and force his own men to eat him alive. It sounds like a gruesome medieval fantasy, but it really happened, and it shocked even the bloodthirsty crowds of the 16th century. Welcome to the dark tale of György Dózsa, a Hungarian rebel whose 1514 execution remains one of history's most nightmarish punishments. Why should you care about a 500-year-old atrocity? Because Dózsa's fate isn't just a ghastly story. It's a cautionary tale about the extremes of human cruelty and the price of rebellion. Understanding this story helps us appreciate how far society has come in terms of justice and basic humanity. It reminds us that the rights and dignity we enjoy today were hard-won lessons from a brutally cruel past. By the end of this video, you'll not only learn what made Dózsa's execution so infamous, but also reflect on why we must never let such inhuman cruelty rise again. Our story begins with a hero turned rebel. György Dózsa wasn't always seen as a villain. In fact, he was once a celebrated soldier. Born around 1470 in Transylvania, he earned fame fighting the Ottoman Turks, proving himself a brave warrior. In 1514, the kingdom's nobles tasked him with leading a crusade of peasants against the Ottomans, hoping to channel peasant anger toward an external enemy. Thousands of peasants, workers, and even priests rallied under Dózsa's banner for this holy war. But things did not go as planned. No food, no pay, and abuse from the nobility turned the crusading peasants angry at their own lords. When harvest season came, landlords ordered the peasants home, even beating their families to force them back to work. That was the last straw. Dózsa's peasant army rebelled against the Hungarian nobility, igniting a full-blown peasants' revolt. For a brief moment, this people's uprising saw shocking success. Dózsa's ragtag army swelled with tens of thousands of the poor and oppressed. They began taking bloody revenge on the lords, burning manor houses and castles, and killing any nobles who fought back. Contemporary reports say Dózsa's rebels seized fortresses, including Arad, Lipa, and Vilagos, and slaughtered thousands of noblemen in gruesome ways like impalement and crucifixion. The countryside was in chaos. To the peasants, Dózsa became a folk hero, a symbol of justice against their feudal oppressors. But to Hungary's elite, he was the most dangerous man alive. It couldn't last. Dózsa's army of half-naked, ill-armed plowmen was brave, but no match for well-armed knights. The Hungarian king and nobles raised a proper force to crush the revolt. By July 1514, after months of bloody rebellion, Dózsa's luck ran out. At the town of Temesvar, his peasant forces met the full might of the nobles' cavalry and mercenaries. The result was a massacre. Dózsa's army was routed, and the rebel leader himself was finally captured. One can only imagine Dózsa's thoughts as he lay in chains. He had caused the ruling class untold humiliation and fear, and now those same nobles had him in their clutches. They wanted revenge, and they would make it legendary. Dózsa's executioners choreographed a twisted ceremony of pain and mockery. They wanted to ridicule his ambition and break his spirit completely. So, on a hot day in late July 1514, they brought Dózsa out before a crowd for his final performance. The scene was like something out of hell. The nobles had prepared an iron throne, an actual chair made of iron, and heated it until it glowed red. This would be his throne. As the execution began, György Dózsa was stripped nearly naked. Under the scorching sun, they forced him onto the red-hot iron seat. Immediately, his flesh began to sear. The pain must have been indescribable. But they weren't done humiliating him. They then placed a red-hot iron crown on his head, burning into his scalp, and shoved a heated iron scepter into his hand. This was a mock coronation. a cruel joke making him a king of his failed revolt. Can you imagine the agony? His skin was literally roasting on the burning throne, the smell of charred flesh filling the air, while a jeering crowd looked on. Yet incredibly, Dózsa did not scream, at least not according to legend. But the executioners had even darker torments prepared. Simply burning him alive was not enough. They wanted to utterly desecrate him and destroy the morale of anyone who had followed him. So the next act of this horror show involved Dózsa's own men. A procession of his captured followers was led out, men who had fought alongside him, now broken and starving. Accounts vary on the number. Some say 9 men, others 14, but all had been deliberately kept without food for days. What came next is almost too grotesque to believe. The torturers took red-hot pincers from the fire. They pressed the glowing metal jaws against Dózsa's body and tore away chunks of his flesh. Dózsa's skin blistered and ripped, each tear sending waves of agony through him. He was still very much alive, conscious in excruciating pain. Then the executioners turned to Dózsa's starving comrades, the men watching their leader suffer. They threw the bloody hunks of Dózsa's flesh to the starving men and ordered them to eat. Imagine the horror of this moment. These poor prisoners had to choose between committing cannibalism or being killed on the spot. At sword point, the famished rebels hesitated. Who could stomach such a thing? A few refused to obey the vile command, horrified at the thought of devouring their leader. The nobles showed no mercy. Those who refused were immediately hacked to pieces in front of everyone. This gruesome example convinced the rest. The remaining captives, shaking with terror and hunger, did as they were told. They crawled to Dózsa's mutilated body, and, in an image straight out of a nightmare, began biting and swallowing his flesh to save their own lives. Some men literally tore at his body with their teeth like wild animals. The crowd watched in morbid fascination. Even by medieval standards, this was a spectacle of pure cruelty. Through it all, György Dózsa somehow clung to life for a time. One legend claims that in his dying moments, Dózsa never begged for mercy. In fact, he allegedly had enough strength to taunt his own men who were forced into cannibalism, reportedly calling them his hounds, as if mocking their loyalty, even as they unwillingly devoured him. It's hard to imagine such defiance amid unimaginable pain. Whether or not he truly said those words, the image of Dózsa staring down his tormentors without screaming has become part of his grisly legend. Eventually, mercifully, death came for Dózsa. After enduring prolonged agony, he succumbed to the combined trauma of burning, mutilation, and shock. Only once he was definitively dead did his captors allow the brutal display to end. In a final insult, Dózsa's corpse was quartered, hacked into pieces, and those remains were sent to different parts of the kingdom to be displayed as a warning. The authorities wanted everyone to know the price of rebellion. As for the few rebels who had complied with the cannibalistic torture, incredibly, those men were spared after the deed was done. The nobles let them live, perhaps reasoning that they were broken souls who would spread the terrifying tale. Indeed, the story of Dózsa's death spread like wildfire. Even in an era when torture executions were common public entertainment, this execution stood out for its sheer sadism. Chronicles from across Europe record shock and disgust at what was done to Dózsa. It was infamous even then. György Dózsa's nightmare execution has since become a morbid legend, often cited as possibly the worst death in history. It's a story that forces us to confront the darkest sides of human nature: power, vengeance, and cruelty taken to extremes. The Hungarian nobles did succeed in making Dózsa a gruesome example. His revolt died with him in 1514. But in the long run, their cruelty only highlighted the injustice of the feudal system and made Dózsa a martyr in the eyes of later generations. His name lived on in folk songs, literature, even in opera, a symbol of the oppressed fighting back, and a reminder of how barbaric the powerful can become when their rule is threatened. So, what can we, living in the modern world, take away from this horrific tale? First, gratitude. Gratitude that we no longer live in a time when such barbarity is a public spectacle. It reminds us how far justice and human rights have progressed. Second, Vigilance. The brutality inflicted on Dózsa was only possible because a climate of hatred and dehumanization made it acceptable. It's a stark warning of what can happen when we stop seeing our fellow humans as people. Finally, Dózsa's story, as dark as it is, shines a light on the resilience of the human spirit. Even in his final moments of agony, he didn't give his captors the satisfaction of breaking his spirit completely. His courage, misplaced or not, left a mark on history. If you found this story shocking and informative, hit that like button and let us know your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe for more gripping history stories that unveil the unbelievable truths of our past. And if you think this tale was wild, just wait. We have more astonishing history coming up, so stay tuned for our next video. Remember, sometimes the darkest stories hold the most important lessons. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next one.